when you harness talent to a great deal of determination, then you can achieve an awful lot. Sometimes that achievement is in the face of booking convention or in the face of stereotypes that are overcome. And that is certainly the case for today's guest on Made in Teesdale. My name is Simon Henderson. I am head of history and sixth form at Teesdale School, and this is episode 23 of Made in Teesdale.
Made in Teesdale.
And we actually sat there one night watching John Wayne's Stagecoach film projected onto the wall while looking down at the scene below.
It is absolutely fascinating seeing inner city London children dropped into the middle of a working farm.
I have very fond memories of growing up in Teesdale. I mean, living in the countryside and having, loads of fresh air, loads of space to play.
It really is the case that if you come from County Durham, and in my case have lived in southwest London for 40 years, County Durham's still what I call home.
Made in Teesdale.
Today's guest is Sophie Metcalfe, who left Teesdale School and went on to study for a master's in environmental consultancy. And now she goes around building sites of the northeast and tells workmen and contractors where they can and where they can't dig and all other such things. Hello, Sophie, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks.
Good. So, the regular listeners to the Made in Teesdale podcast will know that we start by asking people to sketch out their early years in Teesdale, where they grew up, and some childhood memories. Take it away.
So, I grew up just outside Barnard Castle on a small farm off the A66. Went to Bowes Primary School and then moved on to Teesdale School, and was there through to the end of sixth form.
So quite a small place, Bowes.
Very small. I think my year group had a grand total of 8 pupils who moved up to Teesdale School, so very, very small.
How do you remember finding that as a young and fragile year 7 student?
It was a big change. Going from a very, very small school where I knew everybody. I remember walking in the doors of Teesdale School and thinking, oh my goodness, there's just so many people. I was quite lucky that I've got a lot of family in the area though, so I had lots of older cousins in the years above, which is what's nice about Teesdale School, I think, because it's a small town and everybody knows everybody, so it wasn't quite as intimidating as it could have been without that.
Tell me about some of your favourite subjects and other Teesdale memories.
So I think I was a bit of a jack of all trades at school. I kind of enjoyed everything, both the sciences and the arts. Really loved history and geography, but really loved the technical side of science. I really loved English as well. So I was a pretty much all-round bit of a nerd, really. But yeah, what was the other question? Sorry.
And just sort of thinking about any sort of things that stand out about your Teesdale schooling, any particular memories? Good or bad?
I think it was overall good. As I said before, Teesdale is it's big, but it's small, so you know everybody. The thing I loved about the school is that you weren't just isolated to knowing people in your year group. You knew people across the whole school. And I remember whilst I was there, we went from the switch from year tutor groups to vertical tutoring, and that was quite a big change, but that was really nice because you went to having that mix up between. I was going into sixth form at that point, so I was in a tutor group with year 7s all the way through to us in sixth form, and it was a nice mix up. It was really broke down the barriers. It was nice to get to know more people across the school.
So, as a jack of all trades, what did you decide to focus on in sixth form? What A levels did you study?
So I studied history, geology, chemistry, and physics. So quite science led, but the history was a bit of a left ball in there. Didn't want to give it up. Loved history too much, and it's actually served me quite well going on into my career.
So you did have a more sort of science based, then you say, with the history, which is obviously the analytical skills and the written skills. What did you go on to study at university? How did you use the stuff you'd done at A level in that?
So I went on to study geology and earth science at the University of St Andrews in Scotland. And geology in itself is quite a mixed subject. It's a bit of every science as well as history as well, covers everything. So by doing geology at A level, I really had that good footing to get in there. But history, as you said, it gives you that analytical skills, the writing skills. Yeah, and my geology degree, and then I did a master's after that in environmental consultancy. That's followed right through, and I've pulled those skills through from sixth form through all of that.
Do you own any item of clothing or any sort of household knick-knack that has the phrase geology rocks on it?
I do. I love a geology pun. That's
how could you have a geology degree and not own something like that? So talk to people who might be listening who think that you've mispronounced geography and they don't really know what geology is. What is a degree in geology? What's it all about?
Yes, it's a little bit different to geography. It's more of the physical side of geography. So you definitely cover some geology aspects in that. So it's basically studying how the earth was formed and its structures, processes, and everything relating to that, from this day dot start of creation of the planet's Big Bang all the way through to present day and how we got to where we are. So it's looking at the rock cycle, volcanoes, minerals, rock structures, all the way through to kind of the geochemical processes on the earth, so erosion, weathering, and many more.
So there's quite a lot of science in there, isn't there? So it's the physical geography with science.
Yeah, it is.
So you then did your master's in environmental consultancy.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, so that's quite a niche that I kind of found myself in. So as part of my geology degree, we did a lot of environmental geoscience, which is looking at the biogeochemical processes that happen on Earth. So things such as pollution and kind of those Earth surface chemical processes, which I know sounds quite complicated, but it's not. It's so I went on to do environmental consultancy and specifically looking at contaminated land and contaminated waters. So kind of looking at analytical chemistry, but also looking at how the biology works in that. So microbes, how they have an effect on pollution and contamination. And then also looking at kind of remediation and cleanup. So cleaning up chemical spills, so diesel spills, fuel spills, historical sites. Particularly, I specialise in the cleanup of brownfield sites. So I know you quite often hear about Greenfield and Brownfield developments. So kind of sites that Greenfield is, as it says, it's a greenfield. Brownfield sites are sites that had a historical use. So it used to have buildings on it, it used to have factories on it, and those need cleaning up before they can be redeveloped into new sites such as housing, offices, parks, etc. So that's what I specialised in, is looking at getting that contamination out of the ground, out of the water, and making it safe.
And so in terms of when you were actually doing that research? Was that a sort of hands-on practical field studies, go out and did you do a kind of, do you collect samples, and was it a sort of field studies based masters, or was it very a sort of theoretical based thing?
No, it's very practical. I'm a very practical person. I'm always wanting to be outside, and I think that comes from growing up in Teesdale. I crave open space, being out in all weathers. Don't want to be sat in an office all the time, which
So lockdown's been particularly challenging for you then.
It's been hell. I mean, I'm lucky that my job has carried on going and I have been allowed out. So I think I might have been a little bit more out and about than most people. But yeah, so my master's and my undergrad degree, I did a lot of traveling and a lot of visiting sites and field work, and then bringing back samples and data into the lab and doing a lot of the analysis myself. So running it through the machines, finding out what was in the samples, what levels were there, and what needed to be done.
What typical sorts of things would you find? So you've taken these water samples from a brownfield site and you've brought it back. What traces of what sort of things do you find in there?
So as part of what I do now and what I learned to do during my master's, it's very much it's building a history of the site that you're looking at. So we do a first assessment, we look at historical maps, plans, archives, and we build up an image of what was there. And from that, we can look at what contaminants we would expect to be there. So for example, a local site, there's one in the city centre of Durham that I've been working on now for 3 years, was a former gasworks, and then they built buildings on top of it, knocked those down, built some more buildings, knocked them down. And from that, we knew that gasworks, you quite often have coal tar, which is a really nasty, smelly contaminant, but it's really thick, black, it's not very nice for you. And we knew that would be in the ground. We knew because they were old buildings that there would be asbestos, which is everywhere. And when you demolish buildings, they get mixed into the soils and that contamination is everywhere. So we would build up this image of a site, know which parts of the site from our historical plans are going to have contamination in, and then we would test for those things. So they can be heavy metals if there's been really industrial processes there, say coal tar. Sometimes if they've had fuel tanks on site, you can get diesel spills, and asbestos. Asbestos is everywhere. We find lots of that.
So you actually are in that process, you are using a bit of your history A level, you are using your science, and you're using your geography as well. They're sort of building up this historical picture of what was there. Have you seen this is a bit of a tangent, but this strikes me as being environmental consultancy on acid. Have you seen the Chernobyl Sky Atlantic series?
I have, yeah.
Which is like, it's uber contamination. It's like it's in the soil forever. It's radiation everywhere, and it's never going away for thousands and thousands of years. Obviously and thankfully, the projects that you're working on are not quite as extreme as that. But how do you know? I know in that series, series was based on the actual historical reality of the Chernobyl explosion and the contamination afterwards. That a lot of it was they were literally having to kill livestock, and they were having to sort of depopulate huge swathes of countryside where there was still high levels of contamination. What does cleaning a site for you look like? Because if you've got this coal tar and you've got asbestos and it's in the soil and it's in the water, how are you cleaning that out before you start building on that site?
So there's various techniques we use, and my job as a consultant is usually to come on and we advise the client what they should be doing, what laws they should be abiding by, what legislature applies to them, and there is specifications and that they have to work to. There is safe levels. Some very smart scientists have figured out how much of these things you can be exposed to before it becomes dangerous and over what time periods. So I will come onto a site, we'll have written up a spec of what we should be doing, and and they'll be based on the contaminants that we've got there. So in terms of asbestos, it's mostly dig it out if it's in the ground and get rid of it, send it to a hazardous landfill, or encapsulate it. So put a cover system over the top so that humans just can't get to it. They have a layer that they cannot break through before they become exposed to it. So in the case of if you were putting a house on somewhere that's on top of asbestos, you'd just put a lot of soil in their garden so that if they were to dig down, they would never reach the layer that's going to harm them. But in terms of the gasworks, that was quite an interesting one. That was a huge job. We were supervising them digging out heavily oil contaminated soils from the ground there. But it's actually right next to the river, so there was also a lot of groundwater sitting in there. So we had a pumping system on site that was actually pumping out groundwater, filtering out the contamination, and then putting the water back in at the same time as digging out the grossly contaminated soils. And they were going off to a soil washing facility where they essentially have a massive washing machine for soils that they run it through, and it removes the contaminants, and then they get clean soils at the other end.
So what is the company that you did your masters and then this is your day job? Is research. What's the company that you work for, and how did you go about getting your position with them?
So I work for WSP, which is a engineering consultancy. So they don't just do what I do. We are a team within a very, very big global company. And we sit alongside civil engineers, structural engineers, various other disciplines, ecologists, everything you can imagine that you need to do a development. We're in one company. And I got my job. I started a week after I'd finished my masters. I'd been applying for jobs throughout that. And there was a job opening up in Newcastle, was interviewed. And because my masters pretty much translated directly to the job role I'd be taking, I was hired and I've been there ever since for the last 4 years now.
So what's a pre-pandemic day in the life of Sophie working for DWSP? What does that look like?
It's really varied. So I could be doing anything from sitting in the office, writing up reports, reviewing data, sending schedules to a lab, telling them what to test our samples for, or I could be out on a site anywhere in the country, supervising, say, remediations or supervising contractors with drilling rigs that drill down into the bedrock to find either the rock, the aquifer below, so the groundwater. Do a lot of supervision on sites, making sure that other companies are doing what they should be doing in accordance with the reports, the remediation recommendations they've got on that site. So it's really varied.
You're a relatively young person and you rock up to these sites and you kind of tell them what they should do. Do you get any sort of pushback from people who are drilling down, or any contractors like who's this young slip of a thing telling me how to drill my drill, or tell me what I have to do?
Yeah, I get that a lot. Not many people in my industry appreciate being told by a 5'2", 20-something female what they should be doing. It's getting better, but my industry is very male-led, and a lot of the subcontractors are older men who just like, oh, there's a woman on site. What's she doing here?
And how do you deal with that?
Usually just push back with a smile and say, I'm here, I'm in charge, and you need to do what I say because this is how the job needs to be done. And I haven't had too many bad experiences. Most of them kind of eat their ego and get on with it.
And fundamentally, I guess that you know more than they do. So
yeah,
regardless of your age, your gender, or anything else, you know, and you are qualified to tell them what it is that they're supposed to be doing. So ultimately, they better do it right, or they might be breaking the law, or they might get in trouble with their company.
Yeah, definitely. definitely. And it's not to say that actually it doesn't always be. Sometimes it works to my advantage. I'm less likely to get them to shout at me. They're more likely to shout at another man. So that it can be a bit nicer sometimes.
Swings and roundabouts. Have you found anything exciting? Like, thinking from a historical, archaeological perspective, have you been to clean a site and you've found some sort of ancient Roman relic or something like that?
My most exciting one was, we do a lot of, with the Northeast having a very rich mining history, we do a lot of coal mining risk assessments and making sure sites are safe in terms of that. We work alongside our geotechnical team, which look at kind of ground stability. And I was working on a site in the Northeast that had many recorded mine working entries, so mine shafts, and we had to locate them before they could build on top of them, which meant I was stripping back the topsoil looking for the previous entries into the mine, which was incredibly interesting because I was unearthing access to mines that had not been touched since the mines were shut, when they literally just collapsed it all back in, put some soil over and walked away. And on this particular site, I was able to locate over 30 mine shaft entries, which is pretty cool. And there's all sorts of stuff coming out of the ground there, old beer bottles and bits of wood and timber. And there's even a couple of bones came out that we suspected came from a pit pony, which is a little bit morbid, but also very interesting. It's very Northeast history based with the mining background.
When you said you were stripping back the topsoil, like, I presume you're in some sort of JC. You're not just like there with your bucket and spade. Like, you've got a JCB or something.
Yeah, so I had a man and a digger, and I was supervising and telling them where to dig next. So for that particular site, we had gone to all the local archives, gone to the Coal Authority, and we'd collected all these historical plans that had plots of where these mine entries were. We collated all that data, and then I went to site with my big map and told this digger where to start digging to find these mine entries.
So
cool.
Sometimes you're mainly working on brownfield sites because you're trying to clean stuff up. And you talked about growing up in the countryside, and you talked about that's probably why you love to be outdoors and this, you like doing this work. To what extent in your job do you see things being built, or you see developments or plans for developments and think, that's going to spoil the natural area, or that's going to spoil the environment there? And how do you kind of square that with your obvious love of outdoors and countryside, and the balance between development and progress, but also what that does to the environment?
Yeah, so I'm very lucky to work for a company like WSP that they have lots of environmental goals that they want to work to. So the kind of projects that we take on are always very environmentally minded, and we work with our ecology teams to make sure that habitats aren't damaged, that if they are, we're creating replacement habitats and then some. We work with landscape architects who make sure that these things have very minimal effect on the landscape that they're being put into. We also, one particular development that we worked on, it's the same one with the mine shafts. That one, the design team working on that made sure that everything was done in keeping with the local architecture, which was a mining village in just outside of Durham. So everything was done so that it blended in. It wasn't just a great big new development plonked in a field. It was done with a bit of sensitivity to where it's going. So it can be hard in my job to watch these beautiful areas being developed, but that's why I went into the contaminated land side of things, because I'd much rather see these old industrial sites made into something useful and beautiful rather than digging into our countryside.
Absolutely. And we've already touched on this, but for sort of women or young girls listening who might want to, or who are interested in a career in something which is male dominated, what would your advice be about how they break into that?
Just to keep believing in yourself. I think it's very easy as a woman to get imposter syndrome, to constantly be thinking, oh gosh, I don't deserve to be here. There's someone better than me. But you just sometimes need to take a little step back and check yourself and go, no, I can work hard. I do work hard. I did all the things I needed to be here and I did them well. And this is my place, deserve to be here. There shouldn't be a man stood in these where my feet are stood. I earned my place here and I'll keep earning my place here, because the more women that we see go into these industries, the more that will follow us. So I like to think that for every site that I step on, it frees up 2 or 3 more sites behind me that will be women can also step onto and not have these issues and these problems. If I just show one more subcontractor that a woman can do this job and do it well, then they're not going to question the next woman who steps onto that site.
Lovely way of thinking about it. Yeah, lovely way of thinking about it. So where do you see yourself in 5-10 years time? Do you want to like run your own company? Do you want to what do you want to do?
If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have told you I want to run my own company. Having now come into the industry and seen how difficult that can be, I don't think I would. I would like to see myself moving up the ladder. I want to become chartered, which is something that you can do in certain professions where a institution can accredit you and basically say, yep, their work is really good. So I want to become a chartered scientist with the Geological Society. So that's kind of my goal for the big goal for the next few years.
Does that require some sort of portfolio of evidence or some sort of qualification?
Yeah. So you have to provide evidence and minimum years experience and a degree from a university that's accredited and various other things. And then you have to sit an exam and an interview, and then you get to put some extra letters after your name, which is always nice.
Yeah. So, when you're not digging up fields and telling people where to dig and dealing with bolshy contractors and diggers, and you're chilling out, what do you do to chill out? What's your sort of relaxation that you do?
Mostly going out on walks, hiking, getting up into Scotland. I went up to university up there, so any chance I get to go hike up a Munro, I'm up there, or up seeing my friends up there. So that's probably the biggest thing.
And if you finished your hike and you're sitting at home at the end of a day, do you have a book or an album or a film recommendation for us that people could explore?
Well, I think the musician that's got me through lockdown and got me through the last year, it is just great for road tripping when I'm out and about traveling between sites, is anything by Jerry Cinnamon, really. So that would be my recommendation. If you don't know who he is, look him up.
What sort of music's Jerry Cinnamon? Something I was about to make a terrible joke there about being spicy, but yeah, go on.
He's Scottish and just got a lovely, lovely voice. Very, very real music. So.
Okay, Jerry Cinnamon. I know Mr. Pillen listens to this podcast, and Mr. Pillen follows all of people's recommendations, so he will definitely and some of the amount that he follows and the amount of books that he gets from people that recommend things or music that they listen to, the people should be on commission. So I'm sure he'll be he, like other people, will be hitting up Jerry Cinnamon so they can hear some of the tunes, that Scottish lilt. It has been lovely speaking to you, Sophie. It has been an absolute pleasure, and it's great to hear. I love that idea that you said, that sort of pioneering sense that you are in each site that you step on is kind of forging a path for other people to come after you. I like that idea a lot. So thanks very much for your time.
No, thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. And so Sophie is very much forging a path for others to follow, and is an inspiration to other young women who want to get into the sciences and break into some jobs that have traditionally to this point been seen as men's jobs. So this was episode 23. There are only 2 episodes of Made in Teesdale left. So until next time, take care, stay safe, bye bye.